up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of COASTER-net Uncut. I am, of course, Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois, joined once again by Mr. European Vacation himself, Danny Miller. We are back here to discuss another pair of parks. You've already gone through Fantasyland, Movieland, your trip to Olympia looping, but we got two more fantastic parks lined up for you here tonight. Danny.
I don't know about two more fantastic parks. One fantastic park, and then arguably the least notable park of the trip on this one. We've got a nice compare.
The Kentucky Kingdom, if you will.
Well, yes. It just might be, although far more politically incorrect than Kentucky Kingdom this park was. So let's jump into it, shall we? So this was on the second half of the trip with the Coaster crew. This was one of our very tightly packed days, and really the only day where weather played a major factor here. This was our day at Bobbejaanland and Toverland. So Bobbejaanland is a park in Belgium, and Toverland is actually back in the Netherlands. So we were sort of crisscrossing some borders here, there in the good old European Union. Started off at Bobbejaanland, and I'm just gonna take you through the day, if you will, here. Most people hadn't heard of this park until they opened up Fury, the Gerstlauer Infinity Coaster, which opened this year. And this is well known for being the forwards, backwards vote to see which way you go. And we had discussed this at some point. When you and I did the most anticipated shows, I had put this on the road trip rundown at number 10, and we had talked about this back in January or February when we did our most anticipated of 2019 rides, and I had put this one on my list, or we had at least talked about it, because we knew this was a ride I was going to ride. And we had discussed at that time what the forwards, backwards voting thing actually meant. And we had discussed, we knew it was a forwards, backwards, forwards launch, like the Skyrocket 2s, but there was a spike, so maybe it's just you either go forward, forward, or just backward, forward, and you don't get the extra launch. But no, you actually go out of the station and you get onto a turntable, and you don't know until that instance if you're going to turn to the right and you go forward, forward, or if you turn to the left and you go backward through the entire thing. So you really are voting which way you go through the entire course. So that was kind of cool. So we'll get to that in a minute. The original plan was we had 3.5 hours at this park, which is not a lot of time considering they don't have a cut-line system. They have capacity coasters. They have 8 coasters, and none of them are that notable, and none of them are really that good aside from Fury, but they also had 2 or 3 dark rides that we wanted to do. I mentioned at one point that this is the park that is home to what Theme Park Review calls the most politically incorrect dark ride of all time, the El Paso Special. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So we knew that we were going to be very strapped for time, and then going to Toverland, we only had 3 hours at Toverland, and then we were supposed to have a half an hour of ERT on the B&M Wing Coaster, Phoenix. And Toverland is a smaller park, but has a lot to see and do. So we get to Bobbejaanland. We're supposed to have a half an hour of ERT on Fury, which was going to be the key to kind of getting everything done, right? Where everybody gets in at least one forward and backward ride, and then we can sort of hit all the other coasters before the line's built. Well, we get there, and they're having problems with Fury. And we get close to the 10 o'clock mark, and they still don't have it running. So at this point, we've missed our entire ERT, and there's no cut the line pass. Right. So now we're all debating, like, what do we want to do? And we said, well, this is really the big ride here. If this is the only coaster out of the 8 here that we ride, this is the one we want to ride. Yeah. And we want to try and go forwards and backwards. What we learned is that there is actually a little bit of a way to guarantee that you get both experiences if you wait in the line 2 times. So when you get up to the station, you can go one way, and that line, whatever train that line loads, so they alternate from which side they load. The one line always goes forward. The other line votes for forwards and backwards. So it's a little weird because, right, if you don't want to go backwards, you would think you always go into the forwards line. If you want to go backwards, obviously you go into the vote line, but it's still possible if you go in the vote line that you still go forwards.
Yeah.
So who is voting forwards but still going in the line to vote? I don't understand.
Some assholes like you, probably.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what they did as we got close to 10 o'clock here, and they understood we were only there for 3 hours, they actually came up with a bunch of pink wristbands and basically said, okay, we just called all the rides, go up the exit, show them your pink wristband, and it'll let you on the ride. So they gave us a cut the line pass that doesn't exist.
Yeah. That's
and yeah, so, and that allowed us, and they said basically any ride that has an entrance and exit, this will work at. So
barring all those rides that have two entrances or two.
But like it wasn't good for like some of the, like they had a maze or something.
Okay.
It wasn't good for stuff like that. But any ride that had a dedicated entrance and exit, it would be good for. So essentially all the coasters and the dark rides, which was nice. So we jumped over while they were still working on Fury. We jumped over and rode the Gerstlauer Eurofighter Typhoon, which is, I think, the original Eurofighter. It's very compact. It's actually a really fun layout. It kind of makes me wonder why they didn't clone this one more and why they came up with some of the other ones that they've cloned. Wasn't super rough either, which was a nice little surprise. I was expecting, original Eurofighter. They're certainly not the smoothest rides in the world over the shoulder harnesses. Quite smooth. Actually, the roughest part of the ride was the vertical loop right after the first drop. The barrel rolls, the helixes. There's 3 barrel rolls on this ride, and the helixes they were all pretty smooth. So enjoyed Typhoon. Fury then reopened. Or opened for the first time. So we went over to Fury, and at the exit, of course, all the coaster crew people were kind of congregating and making their way up there. And they basically were, it's 3 rows on this train. So it's 12 seats altogether. And every train, they were taking 4 coaster crew people to put us in the front row of every train. And they were having us stand off to one side if we wanted to go forwards or if we wanted to do the vote train. So they were doing the same thing for us, which was really nice. So obviously we wanted to try backwards first. And when you've got 4 coaster crew people that are all voting for backwards, the odds were in your favor that 3 of the other 8 were going to vote backwards, which was nice. So we got backwards first. Really bizarre experience. It's really, really odd getting launched, the backwards, forwards, backwards, and then going through some of the elements backwards and not having ridden it first forwards. We really didn't know what the layout was. I mean, you could see the entire ride. You're walking under the ride, but because the ride wasn't running, we hadn't watched the train really go through the layout, so we didn't really know what to expect. So in that regard, doing backwards was very, very cool. However, the ride is much, much better going forwards. We all thought it was far superior, thought it was more forceful, thought it was more fun, for whatever reason that might be. We thought the launches were better doing the forwards, backwards, forwards. It had bits of Monster in it and bits of Hang Time from Knott's Berry Farm. It's a shorter ride. Nothing out of this world amazing. It's in my top 100 in terms of steel coasters go. Pull up my rankings here at the moment, but generally a really fun ride. It's kind of one of those rides where you look at it and you think you know what to expect, and that's probably about what you get. For me, I have Fury 85 on my steal list in my top 100 there. So again, just a hair below Star Trek Operation Enterprise, which we talked about the last time. So a very comparable ride in terms of length. Obviously not the theme that you get with Star Trek, but it's a very similar ride experience as far as the coaster goes.
Yeah.
The other coasters really not notable. I'm going off RCDV here. Bob Express is their Mac powered mine train. You've got the Dreamcatcher, which is a Vekoma suspended swinging coaster. So take the Arrow suspended coasters that swing, or if you've been on the Vampire at Chessington, where it's got like the floorless inverted style trains that swing, it's like that, but it's made by Vekoma. Fury we talked about. Mount Mara, which is their indoor coaster, which you can do VR on, or you can elect to not do the VR, and then it's called Revolution. They have a different, Mount Mara is the name of the VR program that they do. They do have lighting and sound effects and music inside the building, so it's not like you're in the dark if you don't do the VR. We had been told that they did not wipe down the VR goggles and they were just taking them from people and handing them to next people online. So we elected not to do the VR on Mount Mara, so we wrote it as Revolution.
Well, and I've had that pink eye story from Great America that I still don't know for sure that's where I got it, but
a pretty good guess.
It's a pretty good guess. That's where it occurred.
Yeah, so we elected to not do the VR on that, and there were some cool lights and sound effects and whatnot, so I was glad that there was at least something for us to appreciate in terms of visuals without doing the VR. From what we heard, the VR wasn't overly special, so that's fine. Then you have Naga Bay, which is their Mautazuna custom spinning coaster. A fun ride, not overly forceful, not overly intense. Okie Dokie, which is the Vekoma family coaster. It's a custom roller skater model, essentially. My lap bar was about this far above my lap, and it wouldn't go down any farther. I don't know why. It didn't need to, but I was a little concerned there. This was a weird park, man. This park was really weird. Speedy Bob was their mock Wild Mouse. They used to have two that were right next to each other, and they mirrored each other. So when you were going at each other, you would be going at another Wild Mouse car, and then you would turn away from it. They took
cool.
Yeah, they took one out a few years ago. It looks like the other Speedy Bob was taken out in 2008. But this side, they were both built in 1998, and then they took out one half of it in 2008. So right now it's just your standard run-of-the-mill Wild Mouse. And then Typhoon, the original Eurofighter we already talked about. So that's it in terms of the coasters. Dark rides, the two big ones that we did. We did do the Indiana River, which is a completely indoor log flume with 3 drops. Yeah. Completely indoor log flume. And it's a log flume. It's not like a boat ride with a couple drops. It's a log flume. You're in and out.
I'm also curious as to the Indiana River, because Indiana really not known for their river system.
No, and it's like jungle themed. It's really, really strange. I don't know if it's supposed to be Indiana Jones, like if that's kind of what it's supposed to be. It kind of has like the Indiana Jones Adventureland vibe to it, because you're going through like the jungle and there's like jungle type animals and stuff in there, but it's got
that's what it's got to be then, because
I'm pretty sure that
Indiana not known for their river systems.
No, and certainly not their jungles.
No.
So, but again, 3 drops, and of all the water rides that we rode on the ride, this is the one on the entire trip. This is the one we got the most wet on, except for maybe Chiapas at Fantasialand. We got pretty wet on both of those rides, but this one we got rather wet on. And the building's only like 40 feet high. It's not like it's a big ride. But there's
3 really small drops is what you're saying.
There's 3 drops that get you pretty wet. They go right up to the ceiling, I think, and then just based on the height of them. But you get pretty wet. So a lot of fun, though. I'm glad we rode it. And then we come to the El Paso Special.
Oh, this is the one. This is the ride right here.
Yeah, this is so. I'll start off by saying this. If you've been to Family Kingdom in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, they have a dark ride there. It escapes me what it's called. It takes place in an old abandoned Mexican restaurant that's next to the property that they've overtaken, and like the it goes through there or whatever, and it's themed to like I gotta find out what that one's called.
That I can't help you with.
But yeah, so it's basically at Myrtle Beach. It's basically you're going through and you're shooting the Mexicans, right? This is exactly what this ride is, and it's far worse than whatever the Myrtle Beach one is. I'm just gonna read the theme park review summary for this park because I think it's pretty spot on. Is Bobbejaanland the weirdest, most eccentric park in Europe? It could be, and there's nothing wrong with that. Typhoon with its vertical lift 95-degree drop is the park's major thrill machine. Obviously, this was written before Fury. But Bobbejaanland has much more to offer. Place is a mixed bag of the American Wild West, which it is. The Speedy Bob area is in like a very American Western, like Wild West town, what you would expect to see in like a frontier land or a frontier town in like Cedar Point, in the areas that have the real frontier type buildings. And then a traditional amusement park where it's absolutely void of any theme whatsoever, which is kind of your area around like Typhoon and Fury, aside from like the ride signs, really, and the stations. Reflected in a funhouse mirror, plenty of flat rides, water rides, one heavily themed and indoors. That's the Indiana River. And the most politically incorrect shooting dark ride anywhere, which is the El Paso Special. So let me try and summarize this for you. So you're going through, El Paso is right on the Texas-Mexico border. So the premise behind this ride is you're going through the saloon in El Paso.
It's so bad.
And the Mexicans are coming into the saloon, and you're trying to shoot them. It's what's going on here. And there's a point where there's like a dancer, like a salsa dancer or something, up on a stage, and she's in this very elaborate red dress. And there's a Mexican guy kneeling down on one knee at this front of the stage, and the animatronic is lifting up the lady's skirt, and he's looking up the dancer's skirt. There's like the Mexican guys are like peeping out of the barrels that are hidden in the corners. The bartender has two of them, and he's clanking their heads together. And all the while you're shooting at them, which is just the most ridiculous part of this. It was one of the funniest things I've ever done in a theme park. For sure. And you do get a score at the end. It doesn't count, and the guns are like just little pistols. Like they're not like the Sally Dark Ride shooters where they're decorated up. It literally looks like they took a toy pistol and just put a bunch of they put a laser in it and just wired it up into the car, and that's what you're shooting. And there's no display or anything in the car. You just get to a TV screen at the end, and it shows you what your score is at the end. It was, if you don't ever plan on going to this park in the near future, go watch a video of it. I'm sure there's plenty of them out there. It is quite hilarious, and it is certainly something that you would never see over here. And that's part of the allure of going to the European parks is, as we'll talk about in some later shows, there's boobs at the park in the rides. There's lots of boobs in some rides in particular, and certainly we don't see much of that over here. Not in the standard dark rides for sure. And
no, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, in most of our dark rides, you're shooting, super villains and robots or something.
Not
and in Europe, you're shooting animatronics of Mexicans breaking into a Texas bar.
I just don't even understand at what point was that ever I don't understand what point was that acceptable in Europe?
I guess because they don't have Texans or Mexicans in Belgium.
I don't know if that's okay though.
I'm not saying for 1 second that it's okay. I'm just saying it's absolutely hilarious to see. Just because.
Well, it's funny because someone just tweeted out something about Knoebels and them having their dark ride, and there's like an African in there who's like a cannibal or something. And they're like, oh, what year is Knoebels living in? Well, we all know that answer is like 1910. But anyway, like just one little scene, the Disneyland scene on Jungle Safari, went under attack a few years ago for this same concept. But yet you have an entire dark ride dedicated to this, which I don't know, I guess.
Okay, and the other thing, so if you go to the Wikipedia page for El Paso Special, and it's just El Paso, they have a blurry shot of the ride vehicle. It's literally 2 wooden park benches with the ornamental doodads on the side, like with the sleigh type armrest, and they've literally bolted them to a car with diamond plate floorboards, and the guns are just resting on the benches, and then it just goes through this thing. There's a scene here. They have a picture of a scene where there's people washing clothes in a public fountain, and you're shooting at them. They have they have the Mexican mariachi band that you're shooting at while they're up on stage. So the ride transport system was actually done by Mock Rides. Oh my goodness!
Hopefully, one of their early projects.
1988 is when it opened. So yes, quite a long time ago. But yeah, so that's the El Paso Special. Aside from Fury, certainly the most memorable thing from this park, and certainly the most fun thing to talk about, just because it's. I mean, we have launched Gerstlauer Eurofighters over here. We don't have anything like this. Again, the thing at Family Kingdom, which I'm actually gonna look that up real quick because the name is escaping me. But that's the only thing that I can think that even comes close to what this was. And the park was very strange. The lines for the coasters were very long, and I guess at Myrtle Beach it's called the Great Pistolero Roundup is what it's called at Family Kingdom. So if you've been on the Great Pistolero Roundup at Family Kingdom in Myrtle Beach, it's similar to this. It's but just way more over the top, I think. But this park was very strange. It was like there was nobody on the midways anywhere, but the lines for the rides were really long because they're all really poor capacity rides. They were if they weren't like the spinning rides that had like 4 people per car, or the Wild Mouse type rides, they're running 1 train. Fury had 2 trains. Typhoon, I think they had 2 cars going. The Vekoma coaster was 1 train. The Family coaster can only run 1 train. The Powered coaster obviously is only 1 train. So the lines were really long, even though it seemed like there was really nobody there. So it was kind of weird because you were walking around this park and we felt like we were the only ones there. But yet the lines were really long. So very, very strange. So from there,
that's not a good thing to have either.
No, and it seems like, I mean, if you look at their list of rides, their coasters opened in 2004.
And can you imagine, like, you had the skip the line pass too at that point, like.
Yeah, the skip the line pass that doesn't actually exist. People, we were coming up the exit, hopping on these rides, and people are like, "What are these Americans doing?" And of course, in Belgium, they speak majority of them speak French, so we're getting the French accents as well.
Oh, what are these Americans doing?
Oh, Americans skipping the line.
Oh. They must be Trump supporters.
Oh, Americans! Let's go shoot the Mexicans in the El Paso Special.
That is so bad.
My God!
I do not endorse that ride.
No, I honestly can say that is a ride that is not okay. But and spoiler alert, not not the last politically incorrect / racist dark ride that we experienced on the trip. We'll talk about another one when we talk about Efteling later in another show, which may come as a surprise to you. But we will get to that one later. So from Bobbejaanland, we went to Toverland, which is a much nicer park back in the Netherlands. From what we were told on our, I'll preface with this. Toverland started off as a children's park and majorly an indoor park, and the entrance to the park was actually going into the building. Then they started to expand out the back of the building to add some rides. Troy, the big GCI coaster, being big. They added a few others. And eventually, more recently, they've built a new front gate that is actually outdoors and takes you into the outdoor now. In the back of the park is not very big right now. However, in our behind-the-scenes tour, we were told that Toverland actually owns enough land that they could be larger than Efteling. And for those of you who know how big Efteling is, or if you Google how big Efteling is massive. Not Alton Tower's massive, but Efteling is very, very large and very, very spread out. And Toverland is a new park. In general, Toverland only opened in 2001, and that was majorly the indoor part. They really started expanding outdoors later than that in 2004 when they opened the Booster Bike, which is the Vekoma motorbike coaster. 2007, they built Troy. 2012, they built De Vervelwind, which is the mock ride spinning coaster. And then just last year in 2018, they built Phoenix, the B&M wing coaster. So this is a very young park, and this park has done very well from what we understand, and they have very big plans. We're told they do have expansion plans. They don't have things pinned down, but Phoenix is kind of in the back left of the park where you can see they're starting to expand things out that way. They did talk about the desire to open a hotel and that there is a hotel in the works. They don't have set dates on when that may open yet, but there is a hotel in the works to make this more of a resort type park. And there are expansion plans on the horizon. And they say one day the goal is to be as good as Efteling, as well attended as Efteling, which does several millions a year. So that makes me really excited for Toverland because they already have a great park as it is. They have a log flume, which is real nice, a boat ride style thing, which is sort of indoor outdoor. They have a nice indoor children's area, as I mentioned. This was the only park where weather really played a big factor for us. So we got to the park. The park closed at 6, and then we were supposed to have a half an hour of VRT. We got there around 2:45. By the time we got all our tickets situated, it was 3 o'clock. We arrived. They're running 2 trains on Troy. We're like, great, we're going to get a couple rides on Troy. Weather looks nice. But then the radar shows that there's a storm coming in around 5:30. We get to Troy. We get in line for Troy. And at some point between us arriving and getting in line, they took the second train off. So now, we're waiting a single, and Troy's a big ride. It's a long ride. We end up getting 2 rides on Troy. Troy, very, very good ride. Touted as one of the best wooden coasters in Europe, and it definitely is. This was my most anticipated wood coaster on the trip. Number 2, there was one other one that I did like a tad more. I ranked them right next to each other, and I will talk about that a little bit more when we get to that ride. When we get to that park and to that ride. Troy, it's almost the tale of 2 rides. It's very big and very fast. The first half of the ride is very turn focused. You do the big swooping turn, then there's an overbank. You go and do an overbank turn with some airtime, a swooping drop, and then you hit a speed hill, and then there's another turnaround. And after that, you hit another airtime hill, and then you really start to get that GCI airtime, some speed hills, some really good directional changes. So if you like the airtime and the directional changes, say of like a Prowler, a Mystic Timbers, The second half of Troy is going to be for you, and you might take or leave the first half a little bit if you like the Lightning Racer type deal where you do some more big swooping turns and not as much airtime. That's a little bit what the first half is like. Maybe the first third. The second 2/3 really has a lot of airtime, a lot of directional changes. It's one of the bigger GCIs, so it's got a lot of speed, really holds its speed very, very well. Troy is absolutely a fantastic ride and is as good as people say it is, for sure. For me, not quite a top 10 wood coaster. Top 15. Top 15 for sure, though. For me, it actually sits at number 15 at the end of this. So for me, that's not quite as good as like your Mystic Timbers, Gold Striker, Ghost Rider. Not quite as good as those. For me, it's right in that Prowler. That Prowler, Renegade, Thunderhead class. I would put it a little higher than Thunderhead.
I don't know how those three rides even come close to one another, because those are three rides that are...
Okay, well, let's put it in the Prowler class then.
Well, then that means it's a top 5 coaster.
No, not quite. Not quite. Not quite for me, but for you, maybe. I feel like you would like Troy quite a bit. Certainly does not have the roughness that Thunderhead has started to have over the years, but definitely has some of the forces that Thunderhead has and that a Renegade has, and bits of Prowler and Mystic Timbers as well towards the end with the speed. So we rode Troy a couple times, then we rode the booster bike, and at that point, the skies opened up, and some people are able to go get the kiddie coaster in the indoor part of the park, which in hindsight, that's something that we probably could have done. We tried to rush over to the B&M wing coaster, try and get a ride on before the storms in case we didn't get our ERT. We did not make it over there in time, and it was raining very, very heavily. So what we did, we waited out the storm in the gift shop for Phoenix, the big B&M wing coaster there. And we just talked to some of the employees, which, we had a good time talking to some of the employees. We ended up not getting on the kiddie coaster, and because of the storms, we also did not get on Divervelwind, which is their mock spinning coaster, which is okay, though not heartbroken by those. And certainly if this park continues to expand, it is a park we will revisit. So for us at this point, the big thing was, okay, no kiddie coaster, fine, which some people got. No spinning coaster, which some people got. Fine. For me, it's, all right, we got to try and get at least one spin on Phoenix. So we're talking to the employees, is ERT going to happen or not? And we were talking to the one gentleman, and he said, it looks like it's going to clear up around 10 after 6. So the plan is we're going to stick around, and we're going to plan to give you guys your ERT as soon as things clear up. Lo and behold, about 20 after 6, sun peaked out, and they walked us through the queue, and they set up the pre-shows so that we could all, as a group, stand there and watch all the different pre-shows. There's a couple different pre-shows and the story that they tell in the queue, which is really cool. And then they actually gave us about 45, 50 minutes of ERT. They let us ride right up until a little after 7 o'clock. On Phoenix. I ended up getting 10 rides on it, which was outstanding. I would have been happy with 1 given the circumstances. But to get 10, got to try front seat, back seat, left wing, right wing. Really, really enjoyed that back right wing. There's a big helix. So there's a big helix at a point of the ride where on that right wing, you're going along the water, and you can reach out and almost touch the water, very similar to on X-Flight, but it's a full helix as opposed to just a rising turn, and then it goes into a 0G roll. Really, really cool. A couple of fly-throughs. Oddly enough, a fun fact, now I knew this, Phoenix is the only wing coaster with a wing over drop that does a turn first. So you get up to the top of the lift and you do a 90-degree right-hand turn, and then you do the wing over drop. All the other ones do the wing over drop right away. Also in the Netherlands, Baron Echtenochtenen at Efteling, which is the only B&M dive coaster that does not turn before the drop. You get to the top of the lift, and then the drop's right there. So just a little fun fact that they pointed out. It's one of those things that, in your head you kind of knew, but you never actually said it out loud. Phoenix, a really, really strong, forceful ride. And it's not one of the bigger wing coasters. It's smaller in size, a little bit shorter in length, but very, very strong. I would compare it to, say, like Swarm. Not quite as big as Swarm, not quite as long as Swarm, but I would say I like it better than X-Flight and Wild Eagle. I do not like it quite as much as Swarm or a Fleur de Démon or a Thunderbird, but I would put it higher than Wild Eagle and X-Flight for sure. Another factor in that for sure, does have some cool rock work that you go around. Supposedly there is actually plans to do more theming and more rock work around the ride as they go along and continue to expand. One of the coolest things, the station is really cool. It's this very medieval castle type structure. But then before you hit the lift, you go out and you're sort of just in a dark room. But then before you hit the lift, you're in the Dragon's Lair. Morgana is the name of the Dragon's Lair. And it's a big animatronic dragon head sticking out of the wall that's breathing fog. It's basically breathing ice, and they've got fog machines. And when I tell you, sitting in the back of the train, you could not see 2 rows in front of you. That's how foggy it was. That's the honest to God truth. And because it had just rained and it was very humid, the fog was sort of eking out of the room up to the lift. So we're going up the lift hill, and there were like fog trails coming off the rows in front of us. So it was almost like, the train is painted like a phoenix. It's like the golden, orange, yellow bird train, even more yellow than even like Gatekeepers. So it really looked as if there were like ice trails melting off of the Phoenix as we were going up the lift hill. It was a super cool effect that we got out of it. So ERT ended, wonderful ride, really, really a lot of fun. Definitely a highlight of the trip, that ERT session.
Yeah.
And we thought we were going to leave. Nope. They took us on a nice behind-the-scenes tour. Then they took us back into the maintenance area, took us into the storage area for the trains. They walked us into the Dragon's Lair, and they let us just stand there as the dragon was doing its thing, and it was filling up with fog and everything. So that was kind of cool. I posted a few pictures of that on Facebook and Instagram if you follow me there. So that was really, really cool. That's when they kind of told us about some of their expansion plans and whatnot. Really, really cool. Very friendly folks at this park as well. Really wish we had more time there, more than the 3 hours we had. Certainly one that would be on the list of parks to return to. Bobbejaanland, probably not a park that we need to go back to unless they build it, and then maybe not. Toverland, certainly a park to go back to, and definitely one you want to seek out if you take a trip over there. Really, really excited for the future of this park. I mean, you think about it, this park has been around for less than 20 years, and they've built a big GCI, a B&M wing coaster, and a mock ride spinning coaster, which is supposed to have onboard audio. Those are some nice sized investments for a park that's only 18 years old. So that tells me that the park has done very, very well. They've been cautious in their planning and expansion, but they've capitalized on their expansion, and they've capitalized on hitting some core demographics to really make the park a success. So really, really pleased with Toverland as a whole, for sure. And I look forward to going back at some point in the future.
Well, that kind of wraps us up here for these 2 parks. We got some big ones coming up, though. We still got Efteling, we still got Europa Park in the works here, and also your review of Expedition G-Force that I know a whole lot of people have been waiting on for a long time.
And I won't spoil I won't spoil it completely. If you've been following me on social media while I was over there, you may know what it is already. But we still have to talk about the absolute sleeper hit of the entire trip.
Ooh, a little teaser there for us. So as always, thank you for joining us here on COASTER-net Uncut. I'm, of course, Andrew Barczyk from the Raptor Universe Studios.
I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
Right on, Ride Warriors.
See you next time, guys. Thanks.